right, this is episode 51 of the Breaking Balls podcast. Bob, it's the Cody Ware episode, so we're going to have to try pretty hard to keep this one on track, but Kyle Larson wins a thinker at Richmond.
A lot of strategy involved in this one, Ad. We've got a lot to break down. I've been saying Hendersonville, Tennessee is the dark horse racing capital of the world. And Josh Berry, one position away from a sweep today in North America. We've got a lot to break down, like I said. So, Dolly, let's hit it.
Flags in the air. Boogity, boogity, boogity. Let's go racing, boys.
All right, Bob, it's episode 51 of the Breaking Balls podcast. We've been waiting for the Cody Ware episode for a long time, and Richmond didn't disappoint. A little something for everybody, especially if you like pit row officiating. But Kyle Larson wins. Hendrick continues its domination early in the season. Bob, what say you about this race?
Yeah, we've got a lot to break down, so I'll keep it slow here. We won't get any speeding penalties over here on pit road, Ad. But obviously, the Larson win. A lot going on, like you said, a strategy, a thinker of a race, a strategy race. A lot of different things going on. There was a couple of news off the track with Hendrick. Of course, those penalties we discussed. We'll get into that. And then, Ad, today, if you're a motorsports fan in North America, it was a full day. The Australian F1 race was, I guess, midnight or, overnight, depending on where you're at. You had Indycar kind of as the appetizer, and of course, our beloved NASCAR Cup Series to finish the day out at Richmond. So, I guess you start with Kyle Larson, right? I mean, hell of a finish there.
Yeah, one of these things coming into the race, we text back and forth at the beginning. You asked me who I had today, and I'm not going to toot my own horn, Bob, but we've got the receipts. I picked Kyle Larson. It felt like this was a get-right week for them.
Shocker.
Hendrick has been so I know. Picking Kyle Larson is really going out on a limb as a podcast host here. Yeah, duh. But it was one of those things. All the signs pointed in that direction. We've seen the Hendrick cars be incredibly good. William Byron's had a heck of a start to the year. And, they just, from the moment that green flag was waved, it just seemed like those Hendrick cars had a little bit extra, a little bit something more than a lot of the cars on the track. And ultimately, it took him a little while to get up there. He worked his way through the pack, and I mean, one thing will do another. And I don't know, Bob. It seemed improbable, and that's why I'm kind of struggling to find the words, because halfway through the race there, it seemed as if Kyle Larson was so deep in his own head, he may not have even finished the race. So for him to come out and win, I don't know. I'm just massively impressed by him and his team's ability to turn this around.
Yeah, you mentioned it was improbable. If you looked at even the start of Stage 3, realistically, there was multiple guys that were in contention this entire race. I mean, Kyle Larson by no means had a slow car. He was always in the top 10. But there was a point where, especially after that contact with Daniel Suarez on pit road, where he had some, damage and he was kind of trying to feel out the track still. And he, slid back to, 8th, kind of was hanging around there, kind of battle around the mid to front pack there. You look at guys like William Byron, Denny Hamlin, Martin Truex Jr., all those guys had probably the fastest car at the racetrack at one point or another today. But you know who we're not talking about right now? Those guys that I mentioned. We're talking about Kyle Larson because at the end of the day, this was a strategy race, and it was, who was the last man standing at the checkered flag. And a guy that has had some bad luck. We've said it multiple times on the podcast. There's multiple races this year where he feels like he's probably been the best car, or, had the best opportunity to win, and an untimely caution or Eric Almirola or something happens. Kyle Larson finally has something go his way here. It's nice to see the 5 car in victory lane there.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It just seems like finally he got the other side of things. Seems as if he was getting the short end of the stick there for the beginning of the season, but to come out and really, I think it was very clear that he had the long run speed. It was just a matter of as to whether or not guys were going to be able to race clean and kind of navigate the lap traffic that you often get, at Richmond. And they were able to keep it green for a long time, and it just seemed to benefit him and all sorts of, different Chevy cars, because I think there was a time in this race where, realistically, a lot of I don't know. I just think with the way that this race went, Bob, it's just kind of wild to me that Kyle Larson won. But at the end of the day, the more as I sit here in real time and play it back in my head, it makes sense because he was never really out of contention. I just felt like some of the guys that you mentioned, like William Byron, and I thought that car was dominant. It really felt like it was his race to lose, and we'll get into how that happened later. But there were so many guys that felt like they had a better car than Kyle Larson. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I think Kyle Larson showed us that, best race car driver in the world, it's pretty easy to take him in situations like this.
Yeah, you did mention, it was a fairly straightforward green flag race for the most part, stage 2, stage 3 there. Polar opposite of last week, where Coda, the theme was respect in the garage, and everyone was just beating and banging and just sending it in. You didn't really see a lot of that this week in Richmond. And, obviously the short track, I say short track, obviously Richmond, that D-shaped oval, it's halfway a short track, halfway an oval. It is what it is. But it wasn't horrible racing. It was better than the Phoenix package, I thought. I thought the Phoenix race was not as good as this one, to be quite honest. But that being said, the track, on-track action was pretty respectful. It was guys, 2 lanes, a couple of passes here and there, but it wasn't just guys beating and banging, just sending it in, knocking you out of the way. It was respectful racing, which, again, after last week at Coda, where everyone said it was completely gone out of the garage, I feel like we kind of reeled it back just a little bit here. And outside of a couple of incidents, which one of them was a man that is in the business like us in podcasting, taking out a back marker, they were pretty respectful on the track, but I guess Denny did have to get a little bit in there.
Yeah, 100%, Bob. It's just one of these things that, Richmond's a strategy race. At the end of the day, it's one of these races that you look at, and if you ever wonder to yourself, is NASCAR truly a team sport, or is this kind of a driver-only thing? Today kind of really showed you that it is entirely a team sport because of all those cars that we mentioned that kind of had a chance to win this race. One way or another, things went wrong. I mean, Martin Truex Jr., I think, kind of making that decision to kind of use that extra set of tires so he was on scuffs there at the end. I think that came to cost him. And, Bob, it was just little decisions like that get made throughout this race that make all the difference. I mean, was there any decisions that kind of stuck out to you towards the end of the race? Obviously Josh Berry with the 2 to kind of, in the 9 car to kind of get up to second there at the end. But it just felt like that Richmond's got so much strategy embedded into it. Anything you saw?
Yeah, obviously, like you said, the strategy played out through the race, and it showed that the decisions early mattered. Like you said with Truex, who it feels like when we're talking about somebody having a great car and just strategy ends up boning them in the end, it always feels like Martin Truex is one of those guys that we end up mentioning their ad. For whatever reason, the guy is just pissed off some voodoo princess down in New Orleans, or the karma in the world. Maybe he kicked a bunny down when he was 4 or 5 years old. I really don't know, but man, he has had some terrible luck as of late. And you mentioned it though. I mean, outside of the Truex, where they take the one tire set and they're left with scuffs with 30 to go. Josh Berry finishing second, Michael McDowell 6th, and Todd Gillen 15th. The 2 front row cars and Josh Berry both staying out, making, praying basically that there's a caution when that last pit cycle happens. And lo and behold, with 30 plus to go, 34, 33 to go, Tyler Reddick spins out. They get that caution where everyone comes in and pits with them, and they're basically on the same leg with everyone else. And guys like Martin Truex, who gambled earlier in the race, they get bit, and they are stuck with, scuffed tires, 6 sold lap tires, which doesn't sound like a lot, but in this series it is. Credit to those teams, man. Josh Berry, obviously, that's a huge result for him as someone who's getting hand to God, probably the greatest opportunity you can ever get as a reserve driver. I mean, clearly in that 9 car, it doesn't get any better.
Yeah.
But the front row cars maximizing their results. I mean, McDowell again 6th and Gilliland 15th. That is a heck of a call there, and it actually worked. You see a lot of teams do it, and it doesn't work. It finally did at a track where Larry Mack was saying it doesn't happen usually at 80 something to go is the last caution, but that's when Martin Truex needs luck, it doesn't happen according to the universe.
Yeah, and that's the big thing is that you just have to put yourself in position to where, you can luck into things. And I think that's kind of the story of, especially looking at front row. I mean, the team consistently ran. I mean, Gillen and McDowell were consistently running, 20th and 21st almost all day. And then last little gamble there at the end that's worth quite a bit of money for that team. And I think it's going to make all the difference. I just think it's one of those things that you don't often notice, the smaller decisions that get made like that, especially if they're not for a win. But it's one of those things that you always kind of have to keep your eye on, because they really do make a huge difference. And ultimately, Bob, we kind of saw that in the opposite direction today, because, I mean, when a team's not executing, you end up with what the 11 got today. I mean, I don't think there was a penalty in the rule book that the 11 didn't get at some point today, Bob.
Yeah. Again, in these strategy races, it's who's there at the end. And Denny Hamlin, who won stage 2, had a great car, but multiple penalties. I mean, the pit crew obviously kind of, had a weird spot there in the beginning of stage 3. He said, you know what, that's fine, we'll come back. On that next caution, he said, you get me 3 spots, I'll get the rest. Well, then he speeds on pit road the next caution. It basically ruins his day there. You had, Bubba Wallace had a speeding, I think, penalty there. Obviously, Ryan Blaney had just...
Bubba was the guy who, I think it was the dude without a helmet who randomly jumped over the wall, and it was kind of like...
He fell over the wall reaching... Oh, that's right. He fell over the wall reaching for the tire.
It was very odd. You're sitting... I was sitting there watching it, and it's like, you're kind of like, okay, the guy's going for the tire, and it's like, Leroy Jenkins! It just goes right over the wall. But whatever. Sorry, Bob. Read your penalties. I'm sorry.
Just fully sent it in there. I forgot that was Bubba's. That was a great gift there. That was a lovely shot. And then obviously Ryan Blaney, the sequence of him driving off with the wedge, 2 of his pit crew guys kind of diving for it, trying to rip it out. That wedge was in there good because he did a full lap on the track, and then he has another speeding penalty before that. Obviously, death taxes and the 12 team and the pit crew early issues. I mean, this was the theme last year, and seems like it's rearing their ugly head again this year. Ryan Blaney's got to be frustrated, but man, it just seems like a lack of execution for a lot of these top teams and these big name drivers to start the year, and this was no different here.
Yeah, kind of crazy, Bob, because we're marking time here. 12 minutes it was that we finally got to mention a Ford on this show. I mean, which is kind of crazy because the entire race was kind of, at least towards the front, if you weren't looking at Kevin Harvick, you weren't seeing a lot of blue ovals up at the front there, Bob. So it just goes to show you that, with the execute, I mean, it's kind of sad that the only way that a Ford's getting noticed right now is a lack of execution, in my opinion. But
I hate to be that guy. At front row are Fords. They stuck their way in there.
Nope.
Okay, nope, we don't give them credit. All right.
No, but exactly, you said it yourself, Bob. They snuck
They
their
had to
way
sneak
in
their way
in.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, exactly. Don't interrupt me when I'm talking to you. Wasn't
off speed though.
No, was not off speed. Absolutely not. But I will say the image of Blaney driving around with the wedge, just absolute chef's kiss of social media material. Just kind of a hilarious thing to watch. And the best part is that's not even the most memeable thing that happened, because somebody disappointed Michael Jordan on pit road, and I do not want to be the poor pit worker that decided to disappoint Michael Jordan.
Like, if you're going to mess up at any race, you can't have it when MJ's sitting on the pit box right in front of you, man. That is just a tough look. And, obviously, if we're going to timestamp here, now we're 14 minutes ad. We've talked about all the Toyotas, except for one. Well, I guess two. Ty Gibbs finished top 10 for the 3rd straight time, but that's all we'll give for him.
That's positive.
We're anti-Ty. We'll give him that positive. But Tyler Reddick, the guy that won last week, has been climbing the ladder for the last few weeks. He was the one Toyota that consistently was not in that top 10, that top 15 all day ad. I really don't know what happened there. Obviously, he ended up finishing, I believe, 16th. So, he did finish on the lead lap, kind of made whatever result of it today. But I did notice that Toyota was kind of the one that I expected was going to be kind of the fastest of them all. And he was the one that just didn't show up. It was kind of shocking because short tracks are usually Tyler Reddick's bread and butter.
Yeah, kind of interesting, not shocking, considering that I think the 045 team enjoyed that win, and I think they deserve to a little bit. And I think you're seeing a little bit of, in the NFL, we like to call it the Super Bowl hangover. The Rams, kind of got hit with a massive Super Bowl hangover this last year. I think Tyler Reddick may have had a little mini win hangover. So not necessarily the best performance. We're going to give them a little bit of a break. They're locked into the playoffs. Everything's doing well over there. Mission failed. We'll get them next time, I think should be the motto over there at 45 right now.
At this point, I mean, Richmond, it felt like everyone was kind of up there at one point or another. You kind of take it and just, throw it away because you'll be there, but at least this time it's not a playoff race, so you don't have to, at least worry about this next race. Obviously, it'll be up for a playoff spot for some of these guys. It may matter more than others, but it's not at least in the playoff top 10 or the playoff last 10.
Bob, we mentioned him a little bit, so I may as well just continue the everlasting storyline here on the Breaking Balls podcast. But what the hell is Ford and Stewart Haas Racing going to do without Kevin Harvick next year? Because week after week, you sit here, we watch the race, and we just kind of are waiting on somebody to show up and maybe perform or do something a little bit different. And week after week, it's Kevin Harvick is the only guy consistently getting results. And at this point, do you hand him a blank check and pray that he drives again next year? I don't know what the plan is, Bob.
It's not great. I mean, Harvick is the one guy that seems to be getting the most out of those cars. I mean, you saw Ryan Preece for a little bit hanging around the top 10, top 12, but he ended up finishing the worst out of all four of the cars. Almirola and Briscoe kind of hung around the top 15 today. But it's nothing to write home about. For them being, a four-car Ford team, a quote-unquote flagship charter team for Ford, they're not performing. And the guys that are coming back next year, obviously, they're reportedly losing at least the Busch sponsorship, that Anheuser-Busch Light, all that sponsorship. Could be losing Hunt Brothers depending on what happens with that deal. And they're losing a lot of sponsorship, a lot of talent with Kevin Harvick. They're at a crossroads right here, and they're going to have to start getting their drivers right in their seats now to perform. Otherwise, they're going to have to start planning for the future. And right now, all the top talent's pretty much locked up. I mean, you see guys like Tyler Reddick that you thought, oh, well, they're going to be at their seats for a while. Teams like 2311 got created, but man, I mean, there's not a lot of guys that are proven winners out there right now in the Cup Series, and that's what they need at SHR right now when Kevin Harvick leaves. And I mean, you're going to build around Chase Briscoe, that's fine, but it's not a flagship team at this moment.
I agree, and it truly feels like one of those, rare things where there's a job open and in NASCAR that there's generally nobody that's qualified to fill it. And that's just not, and I think that goes to show what I think Kevin Harvick has meant not only to SHR, but just the sport in general. You really are replacing an arguable, truly a debatable, a Mount Rushmore type figure, someone who's been around for so long in NASCAR that is just, he seems to be that generational gap between, generational bridge between multiple generations of NASCAR fans. It's just kind of crazy to see what the heck they're going to do without him. But Bob, I think we've kind of buried this one a little bit long here. But some interesting comments after the race. Christopher Bell seems to want to blame Ross Chastain for what happened with the wreck that ended up taking out the rocket ship that was the 24 Chevrolet. Bob, I'm not gonna overdo the intro on this one. What did you think of the sequence of events that led to the wreck? Any idea who's at fault there?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Chastain always seems to be the guy that's name is in these incidents, so it's easy to kind of blame him. I think, cautions breed cautions. You stack the field up, especially late in the race. It's going to happen. They sent it 3 wide in their bell, didn't have anywhere to go. Obviously, you hate to see a great car like Byron, who, was probably, if not the fastest car, second or third fastest car on the track all day. To see him get taken out, it is frustrating, but at the end of the day, I think it's just NASCAR racing, and it's easy to blame Chastain. I'll be the first one on this podcast. We'll be the first ones on this podcast to call him out when he does it, Ad. But I think this one is just kind of racing in an incident there, and I think Christopher Bell just in heat of the moment, getting out of the car, just sees the replay, sees the one, and thinks, oh well, there's my guy.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where we're in the same place. I'm glad to see that you were able to take your 20 fan glasses off and see that clearly, because Bob, it's one of these things that I feel like Ross Chastain is the scapegoat. He's the easy target. As soon as you see him around any type of wreck, it's very easy to point the finger. But even William Byron, I think, kind of said like I didn't really see the one, like that type of thing. Has since come out and kind of said that. But after watching it over again, it's hard to put on anybody except the 20. I'm going to be honest. I'll come out and say it. I do think it's Christopher Bell's fault. I don't. The more you watch it, the more you can kind of come up with an argument or interpretation for this guy or the other guy. But I think my knee-jerk reaction on that one's on the 20. And, not a guy who often causes wrecks, anything like that. So kind of really weird and uncharacteristic. But I definitely think this one's on the 20.
Yeah. Just, to kind of wrap up, we'll look at some of the finishing order here, and then we'll get off to the news from the week and then some of the general thoughts here. But just, looking at it, obviously, Chevy goes 1, 2, and 3. You get a Toyota, then 3 Fords. But again, death taxes Toyota having speed and not finishing. It seems like it's been the constant theme of the next gen car. And again, Hendrick did have speed all day. Not to take that away and discredit them at all. But for them to go 1 and 2 and not to have a single Gibbs car on the top 3. Obviously, Bell was 4th, but Ty Gibbs was not the second fastest Toyota today. I think that's fair to say, and the results don't really show that, but that's NASCAR some of the days. But just to kind of put a bow on it here, Brad Keselowski, a top 10 finish. That's 6-car, man. There may not be top 5 speed every week, but man, they are getting the most out of their results, and in a long season where points are going to be a big thing, they're getting what they need to out of that 6-car. I would love to see that team make a playoff run. And I'm glad to see that they've really taken a stride, especially in their oval and short track package. It seems like that Roush team, especially with Brad Keselowski, obviously Buescher didn't have a great day, but Keselowski, man, seems like he's been in some good form to start the season, Ad.
100%, and it's just not surprising to say the least, because I think anytime you put Brad Keselowski behind the wheel, you've got a chance. But just to see how far they've come with that team's culture in such a short period of time, like we have talked about before, I think the only thing that kind of makes this not impressive is the fact that Trackhouse is also just across the garage, or over there doing a very similar thing. But it shouldn't make it less impressive that in a matter of 2 years, this team is almost consistently, you have to consider Brad Keselowski to be a top 10 finisher just about everywhere they go, because as long as the equipment is decent, he's going to get the most out of that car. And like you said, Bob, I think today was kind of the one day of the racing season where Christopher Buescher really wasn't involved in the action. But any other week, I think he's usually in the mix and has really been an impressive number 2 for that team. Oh, I really think they've got a bright future ahead of them. It's just a matter of whether or not they're able to continue to grow and continue to get these types of finishes, because, I mean, the more they finish, the more they finish in these types of positions, the more money they get. And, rising tide lifts all ships. I just see good things happening for RFK in the future.
Yeah. And one other trend I did kind of want to throw out there, I didn't even run this by you, but I just kind of was looking at it right now, and I did notice this. That kind of RCR Trackhouse alliance that, usually is pretty good. It's between RCR Trackhouse and Legacy Motor Club also is in that. Outside of Ross Chastain, not a good day. Obviously, Kyle Busch is notorious for, especially in the pandemic, since they've gotten rid of practice, when there's no practice or real, time on track before the race, when they just kind of come out of the hauler and race. He hasn't been historically great, and with qualifying and practice getting rained out, whatever you came with off the hauler is what you got in the first stage. And I mean, man, it seemed like those cars did not hit their setup. Obviously, Suarez a disappointing day. Austin Dillon, P25, he's a guy that usually just kind of runs mid-pack and gets the most out of it. Didn't seem like he was around today, and Busch was 14th.
I would be so curious to understand how the engines perform when, because I think the weird thing with these short tracks is that you're with the sequential shifter, you're constantly shifting at these tracks. And the reason I mention it is just I'm wondering how the RCR engines and stuff like that are doing with kind of that short burst type of speed. Because I think that from what I'm understanding, at least just from watching the races, they seem very comfortable in higher gears and kind of cruising around. It's just when when you've got to do a lot of that kind of down gear, like short shift, a lot, the engine's having to work very hard in short periods and short spurts. I think there may be a little bit of an engineering issue in there. I'm not going to dive too much deeper than that because I can already see my co-host eyes glazing over. So let alone anybody else who's listening to this.
I'm going to say I'm not smart enough to even know what you're talking about, but I appreciate you for even trying to make some of our smarter listeners feel like they are thinking for a minute.
I kind of caught myself out. I was going to say I caught myself out on the branch there and decided, holy shit, time to go back to the tree.
Yeah, please come back. I don't want to have to reel this back one in before Stephen Hawking shows up. But anyway, I got to mention the two cars out of that pack that I didn't mention, the Legacy Motor Club cars, and then we'll kind of put a bow on this ad. Obviously, Noah Gragson, the first car that DNF'd, he had the toe link brake goes in the wall, and Eric Jones, couple laps down, just never got into rhythm, 31st. I mean, man, that team has had a struggle to start the season. I mentioned it a couple weeks ago when we kind of wrapped the West Coast trip up. They were a team that really showed some promise to start the year last year. And I really had some high hopes on them this year. I think that lineup is potentially good with Gragson and Jones, but man, they have just struggled to start the first couple races this year, the first 6-7 races, and I don't know what the issue is, if it's just bad results, if it's a little bit of race strategy. But, man, it has been a struggle to start the season, to say the least, over at what you call Petty Johnson. But, I mean, man, another rough day for a team that is young and, I guess, in the sophomore slump.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily sure if I'm ready to call them the New York Jets of NASCAR or the Denver Broncos of NASCAR. But then again, they're not paying anybody a ton of money over there at old Petty Johnson. But yeah, Bob, it's been disappointing to start, to say the least. I thought when we were looking at this driver tandem that we were going to get a little more out of it. And so far, they both just seem to have struggled. I'm not sure what is needed over there, whether it's, something going on with the drivers, the engineers, or I don't know if they just need an exorcism over at Petty Johnson. I really don't know what the issue is, but they don't have any speed, and it's very disappointing because I, like you, had a lot of high hopes for this team, Bob, and they've certainly sold short on a lot of them.
Yeah, and I mean, and again, the Penske cars, 2 of the 3, 26th and then 28th with Blaney and Hendrick. So just some of these teams that, had some, bigger potential, we thought, going into the season, second year in the next year, and Carl, a bit more research. Another struggle for them.
It was interesting to see Joey Logano kind of take a chance, and they mentioned it on the broadcast today, but brought just a completely different setup than anybody at Penske and had a little bit of success with it early. Obviously not a ton of success in the long run, but kind of interesting to see. Like they said, I think they mentioned it on the broadcast that he's felt very comfortable in just about every other type of track. They know that they're bang on when they go to the speedways and the super speedways, but he was kind of seemed to be taking a whole season approach. They come to Richmond twice, figured why not throw a dart at the wall, see if something sticks.
Well, I mean, and he's also won at Richmond before, multiple winners there. It's same kind of similar style as Phoenix, where he's obviously had success there recently. So not shocked to see him finish 7th there. But yeah, like you said, they came with something different. So kind of an indictment on the rest of the Penske setup, I guess, that it was not it. But yeah, just to kind of bow on it, Go ahead.
You mentioned indictment, Bob. Should we get into it, or do you want to put a bow on this before we get into it?
Well, that was exactly where I was going with it. I was going to say to put a bow on it. Obviously it was strategic off the track, but there was more strategy going off in the courtroom. It felt like over there because NASCAR, we'd kind of gone over those Hendrick penalties where they had these season-altering points penalties, these big fines, crew chief penalties, and obviously the appeal comes back this week that everything's going to hold up except for the most crucial part of the actual penalty there, the points part. So all the 100-point penalties are rescinded. Alex Bowman comes back into the race as your points leader. Everything is back in the world. Papa Rick pays off a fine publicly, basically, to get these louvers gone, and everything is hunky-dory. But yeah, I know. We can go ahead and transition to it now. What are your thoughts about this one?
You know what, Bob? I'm just going to say it. I was so very excited because we got to cross 2 of my favorite things, legal work and NASCAR, because, Bob, the appeals process came down, and I am almost positive this had to be some sort of arbitration, because Rick Hendrick probably paid a man a lot of money to go in there and advocate for him, who then paid the neutral arbitrator a lot of money to then not levy any of these penalties. I mean, if there was, it's one of these things. I think my favorite analogy or favorite reference to it came from my co-host, who essentially explained to me that, Rick Hendrick at this point is the Logan Roy of NASCAR. That he does everything he wants to with no consequences. And if you didn't see this coming, I honestly don't think you had your eyes open, because I think it was one of those things. As soon as they got the penalty, I was like, all right, just wait for the appeal. Hold your breath. Let's not react, because at the end of the day, I knew that we were going to end up right here. And it's hilarious because, of course, NASCAR Twitter has run with it. No, it's unfair. It's this, it's that. But it's not. It's Hendrick Motorsports, Bob.
I just need to be very clear here. Papa Rick is 100% trying to play Logan Roy in Succession. I don't think he can get away with quite what Logan gets away with. But just for the record, if that is what the dynamic is, Alex Bowman is probably cousin Greg in this scenario. I feel like that is probably a fitting comparison.
Is Chase Elliott Shiv? Is Jeff Gordon Shiv? I think Jeff Gordon's Shiv. No, I think it is. It's the favorite son. I'm telling you, it's the favorite kid. It's Shiv. I'm telling you, Jeff Gordon is Shiv. You may not like it, but it's true.
We'll have to talk about that one off the podcast. Oh, that's a fun debate. Well, that's an off the podcast, but I'd like to actually break that one down.
We're gonna have to sort this one up.
But as you know, with Succession, it's a very raunchy show, so we can't talk about basically the comparisons we really want to talk about on here. But Conor Roy was interested in politics at a very young age. I digress. Ad, like you said, not too shocking that some kind of appeal turnover happens, but out of the three that you're going to overturn from, again, an independent panel, it's made up of three different people that are kind of brought in separate from everything here. Out of the fine, out of the fine, the suspensions, and the points penalties, out of anything you're going to get appealed, Hendrick would have taken all day those points penalties. They will pay that fine 100% because they can afford it. And a lot of teams, $400,000 is a big deal, and even for Hendrick, it's a big chunk. But to get those points penalties, to get those points back, is invaluable. It is worth that $400,000. And again, like I said, it's almost like a public bribe to NASCAR, saying, "Hey, we got the lubes back. We'll figure it out later." If you're calling, you got to feel good about your appeal. If you're Danny Hamlin, they're probably going to fine you 50 more points. But other than that, any other general thoughts from this kind of, again, combination of your two loves with law and NASCAR?
One of these things, Bob, where, it does it surprise me? No. Like in anything with the American legal system or anything legal system adjacent, if you have money, there's a strong chance that your outcome is going to be better if you don't. And, if there's anybody in NASCAR who has money, it's Rick Hendrick. And here we go. I mean, I'm not surprised. I'm just, the smile on my face is not for the fact that he got out of it. It's just because I don't know. I'm giddy because it's just one of these things.
So NASCAR, it's so
the process of it all. It's so NASCAR, it hurts. It hurts. It's literally.
We're not even calling it a conspiracy, but it's just so spot on.
Anybody who saw this penalty knew exactly what was going to happen from the very moment that they mentioned that an appeal was even an option. Everybody was like, "Oh, okay, it's going to be fine in 3 weeks." And bada bing, bada boom, here we are. I mean, come on, this was.
Brad Keselowski was rolling his eyes so hard, I can just feel it. He was just so annoyed that, of course, they did. I can just hear it now, but.
That wasn't an earthquake in Charlotte. That was just Brad's eyes.
NASCAR and controversy, what's new? Off the track, on the track. It feels like nowadays, Adam, controversy follows motorsports everywhere. It just seems like it's just kind of a general theme here. But, obviously NASCAR is our love here. I will say, though, we'll take it to Bob's, overall motorsports corner here, Ad. Well, I'll veg you into the deep end here.
I was going to say,
it was nice.
Let me ask you this, Bob. I was just going to say, those dark bags under your eyes can only mean one thing. There had to have been an F1 race yesterday, Bob.
Well, I was just going to say, it's nice that you get everything today. You had IndyCar. You had F1 last night, this morning, whenever you watched it. God forbid you stayed up like me. But it was just nice to get that overall encompassing in motorsports. So you get to see NASCAR at its best, sometimes at its worst. You get to compare a little bit of everything. I always say, though, a rising tide lifts all ships. If you're an elitist for one sport, I don't like you. You're not my friend. If you're just an F1 snob, get out of here. If you're a NASCAR guy and you don't watch follow the leaders in F1, get out of here. Embrace it all. Embrace it all. I'm talking to you, my co-host. I'm talking to my friends that even talk about it like that.
Oh, sorry. I'm
Embrace it.
sorry. I had a big yawn there. You just mentioned F1 more than twice, so I just went to sleep. My fault.
I will say, the Long Beach Grand Prix for IndyCar is coming up. Are you going to be out there for it in 2 weeks? You're gonna be spending the weekend before your wedding at IndyCar?
Honestly, hard maybe. If I don't have anything to do, I think I definitely will make it. I haven't talked to Daniel. We should actually. Daniel, if you're listening to this, text me about going to the IndyCar, into the Long Beach Grand Prix. We should talk about that.
If he's actually listening, you'll know because he texts you. I can't wait. But yeah, I mean, obviously you had the IndyCar. You had Joseph Newgarden, Hendersonville native, with Josh Berry again in the Cup Series that he ends up winning. Adam, at Texas Motor Speedway, which I got to mention, that's the only reason I'm mentioning it real quick here, the IndyCar race. It was at Texas Motor Speedway. We make no bones about the Texas track and how the racing is what it is there. Hand to God, Ad. Great racing today. IndyCar proved you can pull off great racing at Texas 2 years in a row. The passing was great. There was legitimately 2 grooves of racing. I'm not saying the next-gen car can solve every problem, but maybe what we saw last year, which wasn't a complete dud, and what we saw with IndyCar, maybe there is a little bit of hope in the world because Texas might have a little bit of racing left in it still.
Well, I mean, the one thing is I think it just shows that the 2 very clearly defined grooves is what I think is most heartening to me as you watch it, because it just makes you think that, hey, maybe some of these next-gen drivers will see, okay, you can legitimately make this a not so much of a follow-the-leader type track. And, I don't know. It's hard to say because really what is the transition, because there's so many differences in the cars, but it is interesting to see. It does prove that the track can produce good racing for open-wheel cars. The jury's still out as to just whether or not we're going to get a really good stock car race there this year.
Well, and again, I like to mention the NASCAR comparison to all the sports just because it's not only comparable with you and you'll understand it, but again, for most people, it is the easiest comparison with NASCAR just because it's, for the most part, pretty straightforward. It's very easy to digest. With IndyCar, you had the race finish under yellow today at Texas. A great battle between 2 leaders, Pato O'Ward and Joseph Newgarden, and it ends under yellow with 2 laps to go. There's a caution, and they time it. They're neck and neck, and that's how the race ends. They come back to the line. It's over. Not in the NASCAR world. We'll redo it as many times as we have to, damn it, until we get a true finish. And then we get to F1 this morning, last night, wherever you may be, and it was a general shit show. I'll be quite honest with you. F1 does everything but the racing right for the most part. I always say that, and this was another case where the governing body for the pinnacle of motorsports just botches it again. You're sitting there. I'm sitting there at 2 a.m. They do a 1-lap shootout ad where they red flag the race because there's debris on the course. Whatever. We're not going to finish under a safety car. I actually respect that. Adam, as a race fan, you got to respect it when they try and finish under green, right?
No, 100%. I mean, at least the effort is there. I think, I've always said that about the NASCAR overtime rule, is that at least the effort to finish under a green and to have like a legitimate race finish is there. It's always the execution that kind of fucks it up, but at least when NASCAR fucks up, we can look at the rule book and understand it. But continue, Bob. I like where you're headed.
Well, and we can look at NASCAR and say, well, that's NASCAR. Rubbin's racing. They beat and they bang. Sometimes, like Dale Jr. said on his podcast last week, sometimes it ends with everyone going and partying all night. Sometimes it ends in a bar fight with your friends. With F1, it's supposedly the highest pinnacle of racing. It's, it is what it is. And you get this red flag where they try and end the race under a 1-lap shootout. They literally start at the line like it's the beginning of the race. And as soon as they hit the line to start the race, it's the last lap of the race. Now, Adam, after COTA last weekend, I think we can all freaking predict what in the world was going to happen, right? Jenson Button was probably having PTSD sitting there in the commentary booth at F1. He was probably shaking, thinking about what was about to happen. And I mean, yeah, it was carnage. It was absolute carnage. I mean, the cars took each other out. They didn't make it through Sector 1, which means the lap doesn't count in F1. So you sit there for 30 minutes, they red flag the race, and they go, oh, by the way, yeah, we're not actually going to restart the race. We're going to have them get out of the car, get back in the car, buckle up, and then go do a pace lap, go back to the finish line because it has to finish under protocol. And again, I get F1 and their standards, their protocols, but it just shows the differences. At least with NASCAR, if you're going to get a shit show, you know what it's going to be, and you know it's at least going to be a little chaotic. With F1, you had all this potential, and then it goes and it blows up in your face, and they go, well, that's it, and we're going to have to draw it out in this procedural while we figure out what's going on. It's the pinnacle of motorsports, and it feels like they just write it up as they go. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but I actually was yearning for Coda a little bit after last week and watching last night. I can't believe I'm saying that. Is something wrong with me?
No, because I think you know this, that I value my sleep very highly, and enough that I'm probably not going to stay up and watch it. But to prepare for the podcast, I did watch what was the end of the Euro Trash shit show, and I just didn't. Yeah, I guess it's one of those things. Like we talked about this. At least when NASCAR makes up their rules, it's before the season, and they've at least had a few beers. F1 is doing this stone cold sober during the race. Like, this is just one of these things, and none of these decisions ever make any sense. And they always, the race, they just always end up in hot water. Somehow, some way, the two biggest governing bodies of racing in the world just can't figure it out really ever.
But that's the thing when you're in an entertainment business. You get it with NASCAR too, but F1, it's all about the drama more than the racing. At the end of the day, it feels like, whether that's the Netflix just intention or the way it's been the last few years, it feels like the drama outweighs the actual racing most of the time. And the news is always what's going on between the drivers, not what's on the track. But again, like I said, just shows the differences in each of the spectacles of motorsports, between IndyCar just wrapping it up under yellow after great racing, NASCAR is saying we'll do it as many times as we need to, and then F1 just kind of blended it in between. It was a wild combination of racing and a legitimate about 16, 18-hour span there had. So I just had to kind of throw that out there just to, kind of blend the genres of motorsports together. And again, I'm not going to have your F1 slander here, Ad. All motorsports are good. Embrace it.
Okay. Yeah, something like that. Something, yeah, whatever. Anyway.
Adam
Bob,
Adam embraces F1. I was going to say, Adam embraces F1 April Fools. That's not happening. That's an absolute joke.
Okay, it's April 2nd. Bob, we need to have an honest discussion on this podcast. Because you would think that, I am a humorous fellow. I like to make jokes. I like to laugh. Who doesn't? So this is going to make what I'm about to say very shocking. But, Bob, April Fool's Day is just a stupid holiday. I hate it. Very dumb. Very, very, very dumb. Just, ugh.
I'm with you. No, it's unoriginal. It's cheap jokes. The people that use the jokes on social media are just, oh, we got to do it. It's April 1st. We got to make it. It's not funny. It's cheap. It's cheap humor. I'll be honest, Ad. If you're actually funny, every day is April Fool's Day. Like, it's 100% true. Like, that's just April Fool's Day is for the people that want to be funny but don't know how to be funny.
Agreed. If you have to choose a day to be funny, chances are it's not going to be funny. Like, April Fool's Day, like, if you're that funny, you can make that practical joke just about any time you want. I mean, I have posed as journalists in my day-to-day life on multiple occasions. I mean, what do you want from me? I mean, let's be honest. Every day is April Fool's Day if you're funny enough.
It's dead on. It's dead on. I mean, I think it's easily a top 3 worst holiday. I mean, I would go probably April Fool's Day, I would go Valentine's Day just because of the corporates. It is just corporate made. It's just corporate made. You don't have to prove your love one day a year. You don't have to. Chocolates are marked up. The flowers are marked up. What's the point? Just go watch Love Actually 364 days a year. Great movie, by the way. Absolutely great movie.
Lovely movie.
And then probably the last holiday, I'm going to do a little bit of controversy here. Halloween. Very overrated. I love the candy. I love the day after Halloween. That's my holiday. But the actual day of Halloween, I don't like spooky season. I don't like to get scared. I don't like to be frightened. So, don't need it.
I've never understood. I don't hate Halloween in the same way that you do, but like I've never understood.
And I don't
the
dress
people
up.
The people who like go out and they're like, oh, let's go get scared. I'm just like, why? I'm like, I don't know if I spent enough time like living in beautiful South Central Los Angeles that I could just walk outside and that's I got my car stolen, Bob. That's pretty much a haunted horror house. That's the biggest haunted house you could ever want. I mean, let's call that what it is. I mean, Halloween's just kind of a general state of affairs when you live in Los Angeles.
If if you want to go get paid $50 to get chased around and get scared, clearly you didn't have enough trauma in your life growing up. Congratulations, but it's just not my idea of fun. I don't want my heart racing. I already have enough heart problems as it is with my diet. I don't need it with Halloween 4, Jason's Revenge, or Freddy versus Jason. I don't need any of that in my life, Ad. Can't handle it.
Yeah, dude. There's a lot of holidays out there. Like the more you look at them, I mean.
What's your 3?
My 3, I mean, April Fool's Day's up there for sure. Arbor Day, that's a holiday that not a lot of people understand exists, but they celebrate trees. It's not Earth Day.
I'm an Arbor Day guy. I respect the trees.
Shut up! You're not an Arbor Day guy. Can't be an Arbor Day guy. And I don't know.
It's the last one. Veterans Day?
Nah, probably Ramadan. Nah, I'm just kidding. Probably.
Adam doesn't respect the troops.
No, honestly, here's my sneaky one. New Year's. I hate New Year's Eve. New Year's Eve, trash. Garbage holiday. Just go out and black out and get drunk. You don't need an excuse. Just black out. If you want to black out and get drunk, just say that. Just do it. Like, that's the thing. You don't need an excuse. You don't need to put on high heels and a dress. You don't need to put on a suit. You don't need to put on a mask and make out with your neighbor. I don't give a shit. Just get drunk. Black out. Have a good time. Do what you feel. Don't, Happy New Year. Bang pots and pans around everywhere. All you're doing is waking me up. I don't like it. New Year's. I'm a crabby bastard.
Wow, I'd love to be your neighbor. I get to make out with you on New Year's. That's awesome.
Yeah.
New Year, new me. Wow, I didn't. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, New Year's it's hit or miss. Depends on what you got going on. I guess for sure. Not a big going downtown and watching the ball drop kind of guy. That's not my scene for sure. More power to you if it is. Not at Breaking Balls over here. We're not going to do a live podcast from Times Square on New Year's.
I can't afford to pay the covers at bars on New Year's yet. I haven't gotten my bar results yet, so I guess we'll have to wait on that.
About 6 weeks away from finding out if Adam can afford to do that, but no, I digress. That that's a strategy play. Richmond was a strategy weekend. A lot of motorsports we got to break down, even though you didn't want to. I had to bring it on you because again, there was a natural comparison. I'm glad we got to do that. Maybe one day we'll fully be a motorsports podcast, but until that day, did we miss anything from the NASCAR world? Is there anything else that we mentioned Ty Gibbs once. I think we did our due diligence. Chastain got, into someone. We mentioned that controversy. That's a weekly thing. We checked off the box. Is there anything else here?
No, I think we're good, Bob. Just a matter of, if you've made it to this point of the podcast, you're a chosen few. So make sure you like this, comment on it, share it, subscribe if you haven't already. Even if you have, go ahead and unsubscribe and resubscribe. Apparently that helps for some reason. So
tell us what your favorite holiday is or your least favorite holiday. Tell us, why if you hate Kwanzaa, we're going to block you and send you to Yeezy. Other than that.
Yeah. Also,
Hanukkah,
I guess
not Kwanzaa. I got my winter holidays wrong. That's on me.
I'll say this much though. Moving forward, as a prerequisite for the podcast, I would like you to watch 21 Jump Street just to make sure that no anti-Semites are listening to our podcast. Because it feels like as long as you can watch 21 Jump Street, you too can be cured of your anti-Semitism.
Goodness gracious. I read that quote and I just felt like the simulation just spins harder and harder every day. At this point, I can't wait for someone in the NASCAR circle to partner with Kanye West. It's coming I can't wait. I can't wait for it to be Front Row Motorsports some way, some reason. Or maybe there's your sponsorship with Stuart Haas one way or another. Stuart Haas easy. I love it.
The Praise Yeezus number 4 Ford is going to look great on the track next year. Bob,
The number
I'd have
4
nothing
Yeezy
left.
Ford.
Before we get canceled or demonetized for talking about Kanye West too long, this has been a wonderful time, and I guess to get demonetized, you'd actually have to get monetized in the first place. So work on that for us. You guys have a good one.